a journey of hope. God is with you and He is helping you. There was a woman named Sarah who stood at the edge of a long, winding road. Her heart was heavy with doubt, her mind clouded by fear. It had been a year filled with struggles, lost opportunities, broken relationships, and the kind of disappointments that made her question everything she had once believed in. She felt as if she was walking through life in a dense fog, unable to see the path ahead clearly. But what Sarah didn't realize was that even when her world seemed dark, God was quietly guiding her, preparing her for a breakthrough she couldn't yet see. Life often feels like this. There are moments when the weight of the world bears down on you, and it's hard to feel God's presence. But just because you can't always see or feel Him doesn't mean He isn't there. In fact, it's in these very moments of uncertainty that God's hand is the strongest, pulling you through in ways you don't even realize. The unseen presence of God. You may wonder, if God is helping me, why do I feel so alone? Why hasn't He made Himself known? But what you have to remember is that God works in ways we can't always understand. His presence is often quiet and subtle, much like the air you breathe. You don't always notice it, but without it, you wouldn't be able to live. In Sarah's case, she felt as though she was facing life's challenges entirely on her own. But every day, there were little moments where God was intervening, whether it was through a kind word from a stranger, an unexpected opportunity at work, or simply the fact that she had the strength to keep going. These were all signs that God was with her, even though she didn't recognize it at the time. And the same is true for you. Think back on your life and the times you faced hardship. How often did you think you couldn't make it through, only to find that somehow things worked out in ways you hadn't anticipated? That was God. He may not always show up in the way you expect, but He is always there, orchestrating the details of your life for your good. The power of trust. It's easy to become discouraged when things aren't going as planned. You might ask yourself, why isn't God helping me now? But trust is key in your relationship with God. Trust doesn't mean that everything will always go smoothly. It means that even when it doesn't, you believe God is still in control. Think about the story of David in the Bible. David was just a young shepherd when he was chosen to become the future king of Israel. But before he could step into his destiny, David faced immense challenges. He was hunted by King Saul, forced to live in caves, and endured betrayal from those he trusted. During these difficult times, David could have easily lost faith, but he didn't. He continued to trust that God was with him and would help him overcome his struggles, even when the path was unclear. In your own life, you may feel like you're wandering through a desert with no end in sight. But just like David, you must continue to trust that God is guiding your every step. You may not see the bigger picture yet, but know that God has already laid out the path to your victory. Keep trusting, keep believing, and know that you're not walking this road alone. A divine help in unexpected ways. God's help doesn't always come in the ways you might expect. Sometimes it's not about changing your circumstances, but about changing you. God knows that growth often comes from adversity, and He will use your struggles to build your character, your strength, and your faith. Consider the story of a man named Michael. He was going through a difficult time. He had lost his job, his finances were in ruin, and his relationships were strained. Every night, he prayed for God to change his situation. But instead of immediate relief, Michael found himself facing even more challenges. At first, he felt abandoned. Why isn't God helping me? He wondered. But as time passed, Michael began to notice something. Though his circumstances hadn't changed right away, something inside of him had. He became more resilient, more resourceful, and more compassionate toward others. And then, when he least expected it, things began to fall into place. He found a new job, his finances stabilized, and his relationships improved. Looking back, Michael realized that God had been helping him all along, not by removing the obstacles, but by giving him the strength to overcome them. God is not always going to remove the mountains in front of you, but He will always give you the tools you need to climb them. Sometimes, the help you're looking for is already within you, placed there by God, waiting to be discovered. You are never alone. One of the most powerful truths you can hold on to is this: you are never alone. Even in your darkest moments, when it feels like no one understands what you're going through, God is there. He sees every tear, hears every prayer, and knows the depths of your heart. And He is working in ways you cannot yet see. There was once a young woman who felt completely isolated. She had recently moved to a new city, and everything felt foreign and overwhelming. One day, as she sat in a crowded cafe, she felt more alone than ever. But just as she was about to give in to despair, a stranger sat down across from her and smiled. The two began talking, and that conversation led to a deep friendship that became a source of strength and support in her life. That stranger's kindness was no coincidence. It was a reminder that God is always with us, often showing His presence through the people He places in our lives. Whether it's through a friend, a family member, or even a stranger, God will use others to remind you that you are not alone. The light at the end of the tunnel. No matter what you're going through, remember that your current circumstances do not define your future. The struggles you face today are not the end of your story. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and God is leading you toward it. In the Bible, there's a verse that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29, verse 11. This is God's promise to you. He has a plan for your life, and it is filled with hope, purpose, and abundance. No matter how dark things may seem right now, trust that God is leading you toward a brighter tomorrow. So, if you're feeling lost, discouraged, or overwhelmed, take heart. God is with you, and He is helping you, even when you can't see it. Keep walking in faith, keep trusting in His plan, and know that the best is yet to come. God's hand is upon you, guiding you every step of the way. You are never alone, and with His help, you will overcome.